The Watcher in the Woods. I'd been driving a semi for 24 years, all over the lower 48 and Canada, but the Northwest was always my favorite run. There was something about that country that called to me, Seattle especially. I used to dream about moving there from Tennessee, maybe someday trading the long-haul life for one that smelled of salt air and pine. One year, I was coming over Snoqualmie Pass. It was late, and I was bone-tired, that kind of tired that feels heavy behind your eyes. I pulled into the only rest area up there, figuring I'd stretch my legs. I'm not much of a people person, so instead of lingering near the trucks and vending machines, I wandered up the hill behind the rest stop into the woods. There wasn't a path. I made my own. I walked quietly, listening to the steady rhythm of my boots in the damp earth, the layered symphony of birds, insects, and the faint whisper of wind through the firs. The woods there were thick and impossibly green, the kind of beauty that humbles you into silence. After 20 or 30 minutes, I found a rock just the right size to sit on and decided to pour myself a cup of coffee from my thermos. I sat there, sipping, soaking in the peace. The sounds of the forest went on around me. Chatter, rustle, flutter, until all at once they stopped. It was instant and absolute. No birds, no insects, not even the breeze. The stillness hit me like a wall. I've been in the woods enough to know what that means. When the forest goes quiet, it's because something's out there. Something that doesn't belong, or something that does, but that everything else fears. I froze, cup halfway to my lips, and listened. Nothing. But I could feel it, that invisible hum in the air that says you're being watched. Not hunted, not threatened, just seen. My daddy taught me a long time ago, don't look for something in the woods. Look at the woods, their patterns, their flow, and notice what breaks them. So I studied the trees, the lines of the branches, the lean of the trunks, the shape of the underbrush. And there it was. At first it looked like a growth on a tree, but when I blinked, it seemed to shift, just slightly, growing bigger, then smaller. That's when I realized it wasn't part of the tree at all. It was a head, oddly shaped, with one dark eye peeking around the trunk. I didn't move, didn't even breathe for a second. It wasn't threatening me. I could feel that. It was simply curious, watching, maybe wondering what this little human was doing up here with her coffee and her boots and her tired eyes. It was getting dark, and I knew better than to stay. From where its head was, I guessed it stood at least 7 feet tall. I didn't want to spook it or myself, so I started to sing softly as I made my way back down the hill, a song called Savage Daughter. My voice wove through the trees, and I swear I could feel that presence pacing me from a distance, following as I descended toward the rest area. Halfway down, I passed a fresh pile of elk droppings. That explained it. I'd likely wandered into its hunt. More than likely, I'd just ruined dinner. When I reached the truck lot again, the silence eased. The forest sounds returned, one by one. To this day, I believe what I saw was a Bigfoot. I never felt fear, only awe, and a deep respect for something powerful and ancient that chose not to harm me when it easily could have. The calm I felt in those moments. I've never known peace like that before or since. Sometimes, I think that creature let me feel a little of its world, a quiet gift offered in silence. And to this day, I'm grateful. The Hunter and the Giant. It was late-season whitetail in eastern Washington. Snow was falling thick and steady, and the world had gone quiet. That muffled kind of silence you only get when snow swallows every sound. My breath fogged in the cold as I followed the dirt road into a permit area lined with old split-rail fencing. That's when I saw him. A buck, big-bodied and alert, running up the draw until he stopped just 20 feet from me on the other side of the fence. For a second, we locked eyes. I could have taken him, but I wasn't yet far enough from the paved road to legally fire. I lowered my rifle and watched him. Something about the way he stopped, sudden and precise, struck me as odd. He should have bolted, but instead he stood there, frozen, looking past me over his opposite shoulder. That's when I realized it wasn't me he was worried about. Curiosity nudged me forward. I moved slowly up the road, scanning the trees, my breath loud in the stillness. About 100 feet farther along, I stopped. The woods didn't feel right. I leaned against the fence, eyes tracing the sparse tree line ahead. There was a massive Douglas fir maybe 40 feet out. At first it looked broken, snapped in some windstorm about 9 feet up, leaving a thick, jagged trunk. Then the trunk turned its head, and I was staring straight into its eyes. They were a deep, burnt, orange-brown, intelligent, steady, and utterly unafraid. Its hair was soaked from the snow, clinging to its massive frame. Long, powerful arms hung at its sides, hands like spades. I never saw its feet, but I didn't need to. For what felt like forever, we just stared at each other. Two hunters, neither of us moving. It didn't turn its body, only its head, like it was studying me the way I was studying it. "Easy, guy," I heard myself say quietly. "I'm not here for you. This is your hunt, and I'm leaving." My rifle was already in my hands, but I didn't raise it. I slowly backed away, step by step, until I reached the place where I'd first seen the buck. The deer was gone now. I turned, took 2 steps down the road, and heard 2 heavy thumps behind me. When I looked back, the creature had vanished. No sound, no sign, nothing but falling snow. I've hunted that same area for years since. A few seasons before that, I'd had another encounter. Not a sighting, but a sound. A deep, bone-shaking yell that came from the ridgeline one evening as dusk fell. It wasn't an elk. It wasn't a man. It was a warning, and I knew it. You're not welcome here. That moment changed me. You reach a point where you either stop going into the woods altogether, or you learn to make peace with what's out there. I chose peace. We hunters have an unspoken code. If we know others are working an area, we move on out of courtesy. It's just respect. Now, I carry that same rule with something more than human. I walk softer, listen closer, and look not just for other hunters, but for them. Because once you've seen something like that, once the snow falls silent and the world stops breathing, you never forget who else walks those woods. The ones at the pond. 9 years ago, I never believed in things like that. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever people called them. Those were campfire stories, tall tales for the curious and the gullible. That changed the night they showed up at our pond. At first, it was just movement, a dark shape across the water, tall and silent in a way that didn't fit the woods around it. My wife saw it first. She thought it was a neighbor, maybe someone fishing or trespassing. But as we both stood there watching, the shape moved again, and I realized it was much too big. The way it glided more than walked, the size of its shoulders, the quiet. All wrong for a man. That was the beginning. Since then, my wife and I have had more than 30 interactions with them, sometimes brief, sometimes close enough to take your breath away. The closest was one night when I stepped outside and found myself no more than 10 feet away from one. It stood there at the edge of the yard, half in the shadow, half in the moonlight. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could feel the air change, heavy, electric, like standing too close to a storm. Then, Without a sound, it turned and walked away, vanishing into the trees. You'd think something like that would leave you terrified, but over time, we got used to them. We had to. They came back again and again, until their presence almost felt like part of the land itself. We'd see them sometimes in the field out front, tall figures moving along the fence line, slow and deliberate. Just last night, we saw two of them standing side by side, watching from the same spot where the grass bends down toward the creek. The first few times I was scared. I won't pretend otherwise. But the fear changes after a while. It turns into respect, into a strange sort of understanding. They weren't here for us, not really. They just were. Sometimes I'd be out mowing the yard on my riding mower and catch sight of one standing by the tree line, watching me. Never hiding, just standing there as if curious. Then, when our eyes met, it would turn and walk away without hurry, disappearing as quietly as it had come. A few times they tried to open our garage door. We'd find the handle pulled or the frame scuffed. There was food in the fridge out there, and I figured they must have smelled it. After that, we kept it locked, though I don't know if a lock would have mattered much if they'd really wanted in. My wife and grandson had their own encounters, more of them than I did, especially when they were alone. My wife said sometimes she'd feel them before she saw them, that the air would go still, the birds would stop singing, and then she'd catch sight of movement at the edge of the field. Not all our experiences were peaceful, though. We had a guard dog once, big, protective, the kind that didn't scare easy. One night, he went crazy barking toward the woods. By morning, he was gone. We found him later. I still don't like to talk about it. That was the only time they ever showed anything close to aggression. Still, for every frightening moment, there were twice as many that felt calm, almost sacred, like we were visitors in a place that belonged to something older and wiser than us. 9 years ago, I would have laughed at anyone telling a story like this. But now, I've seen too much to laugh. They're real. Whatever they are, flesh and blood or something beyond that. They live here. They've walked our fields, watched us from the trees, stood by our pond under the moonlight. And somehow, we've learned to share this place with them.